Good evening and welcome back to the forum on Sports Tonight Live. And my name's Jon Smith and I have three enigmatic guests with me tonight. Firstly, boxing impresario Frank Warren, footballer Rohan Ricketts and the Daily Mail correspondent and diarist extraordinaire Charlie Sale. Well, that was the plan, but this is live television. And Frank was easy because Frank lives around the corner and so he popped into the studio. Rohan lives in Canada, so that was easy. Charlie is coming from the 2012 Media Centre, the other side of London, and this is a foretaste of what London's going to be like in the next 6 weeks because he's still sitting in a cab somewhere, but he will be here, he will articulate a lot, and we look forward to him joining us in a very short space of time. Frank, how's your day been? Weigh in, big day.
Yeah, it's been quite a hectic day. The guys weighed in today, David Haye and Derek Chisora were fighting on Saturday at West Ham. Quite an important moment as far as when a fight's coming up because you're nearing towards the big day, and now that that's all sort of done, the guys are now sort of chill out for the next couple of days, preparing themselves for the fight.
Can I ask you a very silly question at the top, and it gets more serious as we go on. 30,000 tickets sold. What happens if it rains?
Well, the weather forecast. Yesterday, we checked it out at the meteorological office.
That's a tough one now at the end of the day.
Tell me about that. They said that it's going to be quite windy on Saturday and maybe light showers, but they say that the evening will not be bad.
It won't stop people coming.
However, it's not going to stop 30,000 coming. I hope some more will come. But the ring is covered by a waterproof canopy. It's got guttering and everything. All the lighting's there, so whatever happens, the fight will go on.
You can still get a ticket then, if you want?
You can still get, there are a few tickets left, and or you could stay at home if you don't want to get wet and watch it on Box Nation. You subscribe on boxnation.com and watch it at home. And you don't just watch the fight, you get a month's subscription for 10 quid.
Thank you. Well, I guess, pretty good guess here, we're going to be talking a lot about this this evening.
I hope so.
Rohan, quick moment with you because football's never far away from our innermost thoughts. Portsmouth today deducted 10 points and they still got to pay all their contracted players. So they got Ben Ayim and people like that being paid 30 grand a week. They're virtually bust. Who's going to buy them now?
I don't think anyone's going to really want to touch the club. I spoke to a lot of the players coming from the top. They said it's in such a bad way that a potential buyer can't really see much hope for the club in the near future. But Portsmouth Football Club, I think, are a really good club, and I think they've done well over the years. They've got a good fan base, so I would like to see the club still stay in business. And this is actually one of the clubs that I've actually been in talks with. I was
going to ask you a chance of us seeing you in a Pompey shirt next year, on the hope that Pompey are there.
Yeah, I'm really, like you could say, enthusiastic about getting down there and about showing my appetite and what I could potentially do for him. But I know the club's in such a bad way. At the moment, the market for free transfer players like myself is really difficult. But I'm ambitious, still want to get back into England. I've played out of the country in Germany and in the MLS in America. And I want to come back home to England and play for the next few years. I'm 29 now, still got a lot of 4 or 5 good years in me. Where will I get the chance? Will it be in the Championship? If I've got to go to League One, which I haven't done, I will do that.
So you see other stations talk about deals that have happened. We talk about on Sports Tonight Live deals that may happen. We have our first caller on the line, George Ogia. I think I pronounced your name right. George, hi, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
Good. Very well, thank you. And tell us, ask us what you want to ask us, please, George.
It's a question for Frank, really, about Saturday. I was just wondering, did Robert Smith or anyone else at the board suggest a set of circumstances under which this fight might have been sanctioned by the board? And was Frank prepared to work with them to make this happen?
I had discussions, not with Robert Smith, but originally with Charlie Giles, who's the president and chairman of the Board of Control. And he actually, he told me, although he may not say it publicly, he said that he had no problem with the fight. There were certain members of the board that did. And basically what the feedback was, if we did the fight, say, in September, everybody would have been happy with that.
This is not the precedent. This isn't set a precedent, is it? There have been times before. I vaguely remember a fight taking place in California where the boxers were refused a licence in their home domain and it went to California.
I mean,
So it's not the first time.
First of all, there are probably at least one or two what they call unlicensed shows, which are unlicensed by the British Boxing Board Control, that take place in the UK every week. White collar boxing, blue collar boxing, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of those shows that take place. This show isn't unlicensed. It's licensed by the Luxembourg Federation. The Luxembourg Federation is at the moment a member of the EBU. There's 3 title fights on there, which are for the WBO and the WBA titles, and the WBO and the WBA, the British Boxing Board of Control, are affiliated to them. The British Boxing Board of Control isn't, it sounds very official, like it's a government department or a that sort of body. It's not. It's actually a limited company that only a few years ago was in administration when it was sued for negligence by Michael Watson. If you remember, he got badly injured in a fight. He sued them very successfully for negligence, and they had to go into administration. And there is a problem. The whole thing's been handled very badly by the board, in my opinion. They didn't ban Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora at the end of the day had his licence withdrawn. So they said, we, as far as we're concerned, the board are washing our hands of you.
Was that a deliberate phraseology, Frank?
It was their phraseology. Had he been banned, he would have gone, for example, on the European Boxing Union banned list, which means that nobody, and none of the organisations would have been able to
kind of sanction him fighting.
So he was also fined $100,000 by the WBC. So he's not had one hearing; he's had 2 hearings. It's a bit like Mississippi burning, as far as I'm concerned, with Derek. And the scenes that happened in Germany were unsavoury. I can't condone what happened. By the time the fight takes place, Derek had been out of the ring for nearly 6 months. He's not banned. He's licensed. The Newham Borough Council have licensed the event at West Ham. The police have said they have no problem with the event taking place. The Board of Control, had this fight been taking place in another country, would not have had a problem with it. This is all about their jurisdiction being, as they feel, invaded by another governing body, i.e. Luxembourg, because they will obviously lose their sanction fees and lose money from the event taking place.
Okay. George, you're quite involved in the sport, as I understand it. You work with the Daily Mirror. Does that answer a lot of the sentiments that were around your head when you phrased this question?
It does, it does. I mean, personally, I've got no real problem with the fight taking place. As Frank touched on, he specifically asked the board whether or not Derek would be able to be licensed by another sanctioning body. And as I understand it, and as Frank mentioned, he was told that that would be fine. So the board must have expected a situation like this to happen. It's unfortunate that it seems to have caused quite a rift between Frank and the board, and hopefully once this fight's done and dusted, the board and Frank can move on and restart what has been a very successful relationship down the years, because there's a chance as a result of this event that Frank's fighters in the future might be turned down for British title opportunities and things like that, and that would be a shame for a lot of the young boxers that Frank has on his books.
Thank you, George. Rohan, you're a sportsman and a sports fan. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about this? Some would say that this fight is in bad taste, and it's a quote that you hear around the place. How do you feel about it?
Well, I'm a fan of boxing, and I love been watching for years from a young teenager, and I see it as entertainment. So what happened between them, I saw it on YouTube after it happened. It wasn't nice to see. You don't want to see that, because you don't want to infiltrate him down, and probably people thinking, oh look, it's okay to maybe act like this in a similar situation. But me and Frank were speaking earlier, and sometimes in the heat of the moment people do say things, and they're totally wrong. But as men, they disagreed with each other at that moment. I don't think that should stop them from possibly fighting each other. I feel like this fight, there's not an actual title on the line, but you're looking at the fight and the magnitude of it. I think it makes for a great feast of entertainment, and hopefully the best man wins. It seems like two guys that don't like each other, and people who are watching boxing fights, surely you want to see fights of that nature, as opposed to, I think boxing, some people said it maybe it kind of fell off in maybe the last 4 or 5 years when people were saying that, because they lost the spice, the personality. my favourite fighter at the moment is Floyd Mayweather, and I think the Mayweather, not just because how he boxes, because he's not necessarily the most entertaining like a Mike Tyson, but his personality and the character, and we like to see that. People watch the WWF for that, so why can't we see that here? And seeing two guys that dislike each other, I'll be paying the money to watch that.
Frank, talking about personalities, you have become the British boxing personality over the years. You've done this many, many times. This is not an easy fight. It hopefully will do well for you, I guess, financially. Why do you keep doing it?
Well, I quite, you know,
apart from making money, obviously.
No, you know, this is my profession, but at the end of the, whether it makes money or not is debatable. It's on, as I say, it's going on Box Nation. It's whether people subscribe or not. And if they decide they're going to subscribe, then it will make a profit, and that's in the hands of the people whether they want to pay for it or not. But I'm very upset with the British Boxing Board of Control. Not just this has been a catalyst for me over the last couple of years. I'm not against the Board of Control. We need a strong British Boxing Board of Control. I'm absolutely against the 2 or 3 stewards that seem to have control of the Board of Control. Let me tell you how it works. You've got around 2,500 licence holders, boxers, managers, promoters, seconds, and so forth. Not one of those are allowed to vote on any issue. It's controlled by this small group of stewards who appoint the other stewards, and they have numerous area councils around the country. They appoint those area councils.
Who appoints the stewards?
They appoint themselves. It's like something. It's like a feudal system. It's the whole thing is just wrong.
Like
there's no transparency. There are a lot of problems there, which I want to go into too much on the programme, because we talked about what you feel something may be libelous. I know not libelous, but I'm not going to go there. But there are 2 stewards in particular who, you know, for example, Barclays Bank, there's a big problem going on at the moment with Barclays. People have resigned for various reasons, but you can ask what the expenses are of a public company or a chairman. You say, we'd like to know how much you're spending of the shareholders' money.
Yep.
And you'll get an answer. Board of Control, you cannot get an answer. And it's not their money, it's the licence holder money.
Let me ask George that minute, Frank, because it's a good point. George, do you recognise what Frank has been talking about as an issue?
It's a tough one, because Frank deals with the board a lot more than any writers really do. It's in his sort of day-to-day remit, I would imagine. I think there's a situation whereby the board has rarely been challenged in its kind of almost 100 years of existence, I think. And I wrote a piece about, when the brawl happened, I wrote a piece about whether or not this would be an ideal opportunity for the board to perhaps take a look at the way they operate and maybe have a restructure in a way that hasn't been done since they came into operation. But I think I can understand Frank's frustrations, but I also think the majority of people involved with the board have the sport's best interests at heart, and I think it's important for everybody involved to try and find some middle ground to work on, because otherwise we're going to end up with a situation that we have in world boxing, where there's 4 or 5 sanctioning bodies and a real kind of muddying of the waters. I think there's a chance that British boxing could end up like this, and then more and more countries will fall into the same problem. And when boxing particularly is in a situation where there's problems with champions and who's the best in each division, you don't want that filtered down to domestic boxing in any countries. So I think whilst there is a huge opportunity for the board to perhaps look at the way they run things, it's important to keep in mind that they do actually do, for the most part, a brilliant job of taking care of British boxing.
I must ask you to respond, Frank. Is that the last line?
I think there's a couple of points there that are quite important. So you say the board, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from. But when we say the board, but who is the board? You know, I'd say to you, could you name 3 board stewards? And I probably would have a big bet on it. You couldn't. No. And that's the problem. Who is the British Boxing Board of Control?
Could you name 3?
I can name them all. But the problem is, and one of the problems was the president, self-elected president and chairman of the Boxing Board of Control, Charlie Giles, was in Germany, and every time, at the time of the problems, every time a boxer boxes abroad and Derek Chisora was abroad boxing for the WBC title against the #1 heavyweight in the world, Vitaly Klitschko. The Board of Control send along a representative, a steward, to look after the British licence holder's interest. So before a fight, there are various arguments and disputes about how much bandaging will be allowed on the hands, the taping in the hands, you know, you get all this stuff all going on. And you have a rules meeting before the fight. At that rules meeting, you agree certain things, and a very important thing for the boxers is the taping of the hands. It's a very important thing. So both sides agreed terms. We're in the dressing room before the fight. The steward, who's supposed to be representing the British Boxing Board, British licence holders' interest, Charlie Giles, is nowhere to be seen. A big argument develops with Vladimir Klitschko, who is Vitaly's brother, 1 hour before Chisora's about to do his ring walk, about the bandaging. And he's saying that bandage has got to come off, it's legal, it's wrong, which it wasn't, and it's all gamesmanship. But we needed the British representative to be there and actually, you know, stand up for us.
And where were they?
Now, I was quite capable of standing up for myself and the boys, so I did what I had to do. But he came in, he was there for a minute, and he actually sided with the other side. And it was really, for me, and I've been doing this for many, many years, too many years, but it's very annoying for me that this guy's not here, you know, bad him for us, and he disappeared. And we never see him again. And all the problems that happened with a fight and so forth, we come back, the Board of Control then charge Derek Chisora with misconduct. They hear it as judge and jury. So you can't be prosecutor, judge and jury. In football, you have an independent tribunal, I believe, for any problem.
I want to ask you about whether that's going to change in a second, but we're getting as I knew that you would, you're getting a lot of reaction out there, and we've just had a tweet come which we put up on the screen from 101 Usman. That's not Usmanov, by the way, but we'll come to him later. Can you ask Frank Warren if it's true that David Haye refused a 12-round fight?
Correct.
Correct, okay. Why?
Well, originally it was contracted. The fight originally was just going to be under the Luxembourg federations.
Can I ask you, by the way, was that it's a question that's been put to me quite a lot. Was that a flag of convenience? Was Luxembourg, did you trawl the world and go, who could do this?
Didn't trawl the world. They're a member of the EBU, they're a member of the WBO, WBA, WBC. The British Boxing Board of Control was established in 1929 and went into, as I said, into administration and come out as a new company. The Luxembourg Federation was actually established in 1922. And now you may say, and I want to talk about convenience very quickly, people may say, oh, it is a flag of convenience, but in Germany, the Austrian Federation, and I don't believe you can name too many Austrian fighters, as you probably can't name too many Luxembourg fighters, but the Austrian Federation licenses most of the big fights that take place in Germany, because there's been a dispute going on over there. Now that's been going on for a long time. It hasn't affected the quality of the fights. In fact, Germany is probably second to the UK in Europe of big fights.
I'm going to go to George for one more question, but just before, very quick answer. Was Luxembourg your first choice, or did they come to you, or did it just happen?
No, it just happened. I mean, there were lots of offers. You know, at the end of the day, I've got to be honest, this fight could go on without anybody's blessing.
I understand that, but it's
we're trying to.
Yeah,
it's going to be properly medically supervised. You know, it'd be
absolutely right.
All the guys are insured. It's 100% pucker. So
and Luxembourg wasn't the flag of convenience. I understand that. Okay, George. Before we go to break, you're going to ask Frank something else.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, performance-enhancing drugs are currently a huge issue in boxing. Has Frank and Haymaker put in place, I know it was touched on briefly at yesterday's press conference, have they put in place a stringent drug testing programme ahead of this bout and this card in general?
Well, let me tell you what's happened. You're quite right what you said there, George, but the Luxembourg Federation had David Haye and Derek Chisora have both had 2 blood tests testing them for drugs, and in fact the UK drug organisation actually dropped in to both of them. I don't know why, maybe they got a call from the board, but they dropped in last week and gave them both a drug test. And what will happen immediately after the bout, they will be tested again for
does it say a lot about the sport, Frank, that there's a lot of discussion about drug taking there before?
Yeah, but there's a lot of discussion about drug taking in every sport now. Let's get it right. You know, in America, it's a big thing because you get guys, I'm not going to name fighters, but you get a fighter that may turn professional at flyweight or bantamweight, And within a couple of years, the guys fight. You know, that's like around 8 stone, 8 stone 6, and suddenly he's fighting at 11 stone. You get Roy Jones, who actually got tested positive for steroids, but he turned pro at middleweight. He fought for the world heavyweight title. Now that happens a lot in America. These guys go through the weights. It doesn't happen in the UK. I can't think of too many UK boxers that fought, you know, say at welterweight and then suddenly wind up fighting at light heavyweight. I literally can't think of it.
I would concur with that. It's
you know what I mean. So it happens.
Rare.
But you're talking about drugs in sport. I mean, look at the Tour de France. Look at cycling. I mean, that's probably the biggest problem sport of all of them.
Do you, in the sport that you're primarily involved in, football, do you see drug taking around the edges or even in the middle of sport?
In terms of performance enhancing drugs, I don't think I see much of it in England. I think the clubs, they do their research, and the people that are supplying us with the enhancer products, they make sure that it's all legal stuff. But I know I hear a lot of stories outside, so maybe you look into Africa sometimes, to South America, Brazil. I've heard from players that I've played with that when you're growing up 17, 18 years old, they do give you stuff. By the time these players sometimes get to Europe, probably out your system. So it definitely does happen in places, for sure, without a doubt.
Okay, it's a very interesting answer, because I've always maintained from my involvement in football that there's very little drugs, and you've kind of said that, but it's there and it does exist somewhere around the edges.
Definitely does exist.
George, thank you for joining us. We have to go to a commercial break. Oh, just before I go, who's going to win the fight?
Me?
Yes, George, you. Who's going to win the fight, mate?
With Frank sitting there, he's trying to put me in a bit of a spot. Honestly,
he thinks David Haye.
Right, he's a long way from you.
Decision, but I give Derek a decent chance of it as well.
And so your answer is?
Haye.
Haye, okay. Thank you very much, George. We will be back. Lots more to discuss. Don't go away. This is the Forum on Sports Tonight Live. We've been talking boxing. We're now going to have a little conversation about tennis. We should have, joining us in a minute, Rashid Ahmad. And on cue, there you are, Rashid. You're welcome to the programme. What's your question? What's your question, Rashid?
Well, the question was, why was the public opinion so poor of Andy Murray, a British sportsman, leading up to the All England final? And what was it that changed public opinion so rapidly overnight?
Well, you're a professional sports person. Why do you think the British public didn't love Andy before the weekend?
Maybe because maybe not being able to achieve what people say that he has the potential to achieve, and I think the press in England in particular really, really harsh sometimes on the athletes, and Andy's promised so much. But I'm a person like this. The media's written by a guy in the room sometimes, who had made an interview, so I don't know if it's a general consensus of the country.
Is it a sort of derivation of we build you up, we knock you down, or is it just if you don't smile enough, like Victoria Beckham, we don't love you a lot?
A bit of both. I think people in the entertainment world, the people who write these stories, they do build you up, and knocking you down is part of the entertainment for people to see this. But oh look, he's fell off. And then, like you say, they sometimes do want a bit more from you, being in the limelight. But I really like Andy Murray, the fact that he's not trying to, you could say, feed to anyone's needs of him trying to be a certain personality. And watching him after the game on Sunday, between him and Federer, it said a lot about him after his reaction when he done his interview. So I don't think people should look at him and be judging him and expecting anything of him. And being a sportsman, I hate when people expect, like, I don't owe you anything. Do you know what I mean? I do this for my own passion and my own reasons.
Frank, sport is harsh, and you are probably in the harshest sport in the world of sport. Does emotion feature in your world as well?
Yeah, it does, but I think the Andy Murray issue, I think, is really quite basic. You know, at the end of the day, he's a Scot and he's a proud Scot. That's where he's coming from. And I recall a couple of years ago when England, I can't remember who they were playing in a football match, he actually came out and said, "I hope the other team beats England."
He did indeed.
And so, yes, you know, let's get it right. That's what he said, and I think that may have turned people off a bit. But, you know, I mean, I've met him a few times. He's a nice guy. He's not got this sort of, he's not the most warmest of personalities, or he doesn't come across that way. Certainly, his persona's that way. And
Does that matter? I mean, aren't we there to watch him?
We are there to watch him, but, you know, it's, you know, he did very well on Sunday. But that's the first match he's ever won in a Grand Slam since he's been a pro. And I think we've been so used to over the years that the hype of Wimbledon, there's always a Brit's going to win it, you know, and it never happens. And he's probably the guy that, he's the guy that we all believe our hopes are pinned on. And I thought he'd done, you know, the first set he was brilliant in that. And Federer, I think, is one of the most supreme athletes and sportsmen in the world. He's a consummate professional.
He's unfortunate, isn't he? He's arrived at a time when he's got three magnificent players around.
Great tennis players, even in Henman's era, you know, great tennis players around. And I just feel that, you know, what happened was he did what the Brits like. You know, when you get beat, they want, you know, Henry Cooper was well loved by the British public. But you know what? Henry Cooper lost 4 fights on the trot. He had to leave the UK because in this day and age, they would look to take his licence away. He had to leave the UK and he went to Germany to resurrect his career. He had, I can't remember the exact results, but it was like a win, a draw and a loss, and then came back. And then he had that night against Cassius Clay, as he was then, called him a great shot, and he became the hero because he had the braggart, the loudmouth guy on the floor. Yeah. And we're like that as a nation. I think we like to build you up, kick you down, and then just get you back down again. So you know what it's like. But then you come back and they love you. I think, you know, in losing on Sunday, another side of him come out of it, and he obviously got very, very emotional and very upset. And I think that maybe in some ways good to see. A lot of people, you know, some people say, you know, this Brit's going to win Wimbledon, and after he got beat, well, that Scott lost. I mean, because that's another way people talk about it.
Derek Chisora loses at the weekend after a magnificent fight and says congratulations to David Haye and then cries, are people going to, inverted commas, love Derek Chisora?
People are not stupid. People who watch sport, they can see if something's genuine or real. More importantly, you know, if you're giving it your 100%, you're giving it your best, the people will love you for that. It's the people who don't give their best. And, you know, true sportsmen who the public like, they are the guys that are really dour, you know, who are in there, in the trenches, and they'll do their best to deliver. They may not be able to do it, but as long as you give the best you can. And if Derek Chisora does that, he'll have no problems.
Okay. Rashid, I know you're a tennis fan. In fact, you're involved in something called touch tennis, aren't you?
Yeah, I was a little concerned that I said the other day on here that I wouldn't mind getting knocked out by Ali just to have faced the greatest sportsman of all time. That Frank's on the show now, I might actually get that set up. But
what did you think? What do you think about Andy Murray, and why was he so unpopular, and why is he so popular now? And my ancillary question, by the way, is he ever going to win a Grand Slam?
Chances are, yeah. There's 4 slams a year. He's got 4 years left at the very pinnacle of the game before his speed runs out. So yes, the chances are 1 in 16. I'd fancy those odds with his hands. He played the best he could on Sunday and just wasn't good enough. He came up against, as Frank said, you know, a superior athlete who is gifted and has unbelievable amounts of belief. Winning 16 majors will give you that belief. But I disagree with Frank about the swelling of opinion about him being a Scot. I mean, I remember the interview at the time, and what he said was, whoever's facing England, or no, actually his exact words were anyone but England. You know, they said, who are you going to support in the World Cup now that Scotland are out? He goes, well, you know, whoever's playing England. And he said it with a wry smile at the time. That was his best hope of a sense of humour. And after that, he shut down into his shell completely and never spoke openly or
it's probably not the best thing to have said, though. It's probably not the best thing to have said, Rashid, is it? I mean,
I agree, it wasn't the best thing to say to get English fans, but no one's ever complained about Roy Keane, and he has hundreds of thousands of England fans that support him when he's playing for Manchester United. Do you get what I mean?
Well, I was clocking on what you're saying, but I wanted Rohan to just put it to you, really. I mean, you're involved again in sport at a very high level. Players showing their emotions, answering questions on the hoof. They have very little media training. You know, probably Andy Murray does have. He's got a big agency behind him. But the lads coming through in football, for instance, have very little media training. A microphone shoved in front of their face, and they kind of turn away because they're afraid to say something. Is that? how do you feel when you deal with the media now? Is it scary?
No, not at all. I think the media is a platform for you to display who you are if you want to. I know a player who plays for Tottenham, Aaron Lennon, doesn't like the media at all. When he comes out, he just turns and he goes about his business. But I do feel players who they're probably in the media quite often, they should use the media as a chance to express themselves genuinely who they are, because I feel sometimes people judge them, they have a perception of them that's, I think, tailored by the media training. Then people start having pops at them.
It's amazing. There's very little media training, isn't there?
There is. That's why I think Twitter is a good device where people can actually come on there and the platform and kind of get to the fans, let them know actually what's going on. Rooney has been brilliant on it, and fair play to him coming onto it. But I feel Andy Murray coming out and crying, or even that comment that he did make, like you're saying, it's not probably the best thing to say, but that's who he is. So I think we should take him for that as opposed to turn that again. That's who he is. That's what he's going to say when the camera's off.
Yeah, Frank, you were about to say something, and I
don't know. I mean, I think with football players like old Hollywood stars, you can't get near them now. You can't get the interviews. You know, in the old days, you get journalists would pick up a phone and direct and speak to a footballer. That very rarely happens now. They'll go by their agent if they get a quote. You know, when you think of a boxer, and I can't think of any sport other than boxing where these guys, you know, they're down in the trenches, they have a real hard 12-round war, and immediately after the fight, they've got a microphone in their face, and they're asking some real searching questions about their performance. You know, footballers, tennis players, at least have a chance to go off the field, calm down. You know, you see on Sunday with Andy Murray, he got very emotional, but it wasn't an immediate interview with Sue Barker. You know, they did all their presentations and so forth. So you've got a chance to think about it.
In any of that? I mean,
I don't think you can. You know, everybody's different. Some people, we've all got different.
But you must tell him, look, you could be on your back when you stand up. Someone's going to shove a microphone up your nose.
You can try to advise somebody what you feel. Listen, don't say that. Be careful of whatever here. Somebody's got an agenda, so think about what it is before you answer the question. But people just say things. They do say things, and I think Andy Murray. I didn't see the interview, so I can't comment. But the fact of the matter is that is the public perception of a guy who says, "I'm not British. I'm a Scot." And he's proud to be a Scot, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you know, let's get it right. Scotland at the moment want independence, and that's where they are. So, you know, that's how it is. But I think the final on Sunday, I think he really got. He really got. I think the public took to him. And and the coverage in the newspapers, I think a couple of newspapers, they were like, it was the first sort of six pages
yeah.
from the front page.
Well, I was going to say, Rashid, what happens next? As far if you were Murray's management, would you be putting him out there? Would you? I mean, a friend of mine is the PR person behind Nadal. And he always complains that Nadal doesn't want to do that much PR, does he? He looks after his sponsors, doesn't do that much PR because he just wants to play tennis. I mean, is that what you would be advising Murray to just keep your head down, play the tennis, and don't worry about the smiley bit?
No, I wouldn't. I'd say he does. A lot of what Frank says, I've got to agree with. I mean, I would like Britain, or certainly England, to have gotten behind him a little bit more, just as a British player at Wimbledon. I don't particularly like the guy a great deal. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have him around for dinner apart from to chat tennis with him. And as he said, he is a slightly dour seeming character. But I mean, I know friends of his who all say the same thing, that he's, when you get him alone, he's quite a funny, down-to-earth guy. So I don't know, but I certainly wouldn't say he needs to start, throwing himself at the press. He's done a pretty good job as so far. I think the best bet for him now is just to do well at the Olympics and carry the GB flag rather than, making it a Scottish-English thing. That would really help him a great deal.
Rashid, thank you very much for your involvement. Really enjoyed your question. Final question, Rohan, before we go to the break. The Olympics. Can Andy win it?
It's possible. I hope he does. He's put so much in, and you saw how much it meant to
It'd be great if he came up with a gold medal, wouldn't it?
It would be really good for him. I just want to see the most talented player and consistent player win. I'm not one of these people. I'm born in England, but I'm not one of these people who just back someone just because they're from where I'm from.
Frank, what do you read?
Well, how many sets do they play over?
That's a very good question.
Somebody will tell me.
Somebody will tell me
he
during
wins
the
matches, but he doesn't win Grand Slams. So
I think it's 3.
Is
I
it?
think it's 3.
Right, okay, well that should be actually maybe he's got a chance. But I thought, I've got to just say one thing, I thought the crowd were behind him. I didn't think they were not behind him. I thought the crowd got very much behind him.
Because it was a final, but the persona before that, he had to learn.
He got great press.
Learn it and earn
he got great press prior to the final and after. He got fabulous press, considering he never won it.
Well, he's going to certainly get good press from now on. We have to go and earn a couple of bob, but we'll be back shortly. Lots more to discuss. Please don't go away. It's Thursday evening and you're back live at the Forum with Frank Warren, with Rohan Ricketts, and now joined by a gentleman who I called enigmatic at the top of the programme, and he certainly is, Charlie Sale. A must-read. The column in the Mail is a must-read to anyone who's in sport. So, Charlie, you're very welcome here. Now, you've been at the media, it's okay. You completely understand. I mean, I just have a real concern about if this is 2 weeks before the main tourists arrive. How bad is it going to be when London's full? How was the media centre first?
Well, the media centre's fine when you get in it, but the problem is getting to Stratford. I mean, as you say, the Olympic lanes haven't started yet, and London's almost gridlocked tonight. Okay, there's the rain and there's the M4 has broken, the bridge. But if they don't get that right by Monday when most of the athletes start arriving, I mean, it's going to be chaos.
I mean, I love the Olympics. I think it's going to be so excited when we got it. It does seem to be a litany of concerns with only a fortnight to
yes,
go.
I mean, I think local have done a brilliant job. I mean, they can't do anything about the weather, fortunately. That hasn't helped. And planning Olympics is a massive operation. But the one problem from the start with London is the transport. I mean, that was flagged up at the start as being a problem, and it still is the big problem.
Do you have a concern about the terrorist, inverted commas, terrorist issues that popped up last night as well?
Well, obviously that's security. Again, that's probably out of their hands, but they've drafted in the army. You know, the security staff, private security staff couldn't cope with it. So there'll be, I mean, that'll only add to the problems of getting into the park. Once you're in the park, it's fine. It'll be a great experience. I'm sure the actual games will go brilliantly. I think it's going
to be amazing. I just hope all these other issues
don't
cloud a negative judgment over it, because it really should be fantastic.
Transport being the big problem. I mean, the Olympic lanes, and sort of, even as I say, the reason I'm late tonight is what should be a 25-minute journey. It took over an hour.
Well, one very minor flag up, and hopefully we get the same sort of luck. I remember Seb Coe saying to me years ago when they were discussing the games with the Australian then management team, the Australians had one railway line taking everyone into the stadium, into the main stadium, and they just prayed that it didn't break down for the 6 weeks, and actually it worked. So we just pray to the same God, I hope.
Yes, but that Homebush in Sydney, I remember it well, was slightly further out of town. You didn't have the traffic problems that you've got in London. And I think the biggest thing, if the Jubilee line isn't the most efficient line at the best of times. If somebody goes, somebody goes onto the track, which happens regularly, if that happens on the opening ceremony night, it'll be disastrous.
Well, we will think positive, and hopefully it will be good, and we'll breathe a sigh of relief in September. David, you're very welcome. David Priest, ex-Barnsley footballer. You have a question for our panel.
Yeah, good evening, gents. Just thinking ahead to the Olympics and the football squad in the Olympics, and there's been some discussions about Ryan Giggs being captain. I was just wondering what your thoughts were about the captain being chosen for a team, whether his personal life needs to be taken into consideration, or whether it just matters what happens on the pitch, really.
Rohan, question made for you.
I feel that his personal life, or any player's personal life, should never, unless it's affecting your performances, and we've seen Ryan Giggs for about nearly 20 years playing at a very high level. A lot of players who don't get their personal lives thrown into the press, I can tell you personally, there are a lot of things that the press, Charlie, probably love to get your hands on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just because you found out about Ryan's situation, which was a bad situation, I think, because it's your brother, I don't think he should be judged on that in terms of picking him for the team.
It's a lovely line. Frank, what do you think? Cracking line, Rowan. Keep throwing those around, mate.
What do I think? he's been a phenomenal footballer, hasn't he? I mean, obviously one of the most outstanding players, I think, of his generation. And it's just a shame what's happened in his private life, and it's obviously become public. It's, I'm sure it's very embarrassing for all concerned. Should he be captain? I don't know really. I think it's.
Let me turn the question slightly sideways. Should he have been picked instead of apparently this was the cataclysmic decision? Should he have been picked instead of David Beckham for that final?
Well, if it's on performance, you know, as a fan, I would say you have to pick Ryan Giggs because he's consistently
been
delivered.
consistent.
Whereas David Beckham's gone off to play in the States, and you know, playing for Manchester United or playing for LA Galaxy, with the greatest respect, I don't think is the.
No, I was just curious to hear
But
your
the
thoughts.
other side of it is, I mean, I suppose they were looking at the fact that, you know, David Beckham was one of the ambassadors who helped to bring the Olympics in over here. But why do you play for a team? You've got to be the best.
So Charlie,
available.
as far as you're concerned, is he the right person to captain the team? Should his personal life have any
personal life
involvement in this?
shouldn't come into. He's a role model as a footballer, which is an important thing. You can't start deciding on personal life. Others, Frank would never put on a fight. There'll never be a football team picked. But I mean, the Beckham issue is ridiculous. I mean, David Beckham, Stuart Pearce shouldn't. There's so much talk about Beckham. It's the whole build-up to the Olympics would be about Beckham playing. Now, if Stuart Pearce didn't want to pick Beckham, then don't pick him on the shortlist. Don't put him on that 35. Somebody with Beckham standing in the game should be given that courtesy. You can't then put him on the shortlist and then leave him out. And the whole problem with Pearce is that he's been, since Roy Hodgson's taken over as manager, Pearce has been sidelined. He wasn't part of the Euro 2012. He's a relatively strange individual, in my opinion. He's not, I don't think, a best possible coach for the team. You know, and you got the feeling that this is sort of having one back at the FA for.
Can we take the MLS seriously?
Take
the MLS players that go to the MLS. Do we take that seriously, or do we just say, well, they're just finishing their careers?
Well, Beckham. He's been over there to watch Beckham 3 times. You got Thierry Henry plays in the league, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. To me, it looks a bit like Championship at its best.
That's what
You've seen it as well. You've seen it, Rohan.
I played in it.
Yeah. You've played in it.
What do you
2 years.
think?
I played for Toronto FC. I think that it should be taken more serious to a point. The level of it is not as high as Championship, maybe a bit lower. Because you see the players like the Beckhams, Rafael Marquez was playing for Barcelona, and Thierry Henry. These players have gone to the MLS, and I spoke to a couple of owners, and I said to them, if this league's going to move forward, they can't just be signing these players who are coming here, and they're not just coming here for a vacation. It's that they're not at the same level they was. They haven't got the same hunger and desire naturally. So they've come to this league predominantly for the contracts and the lifestyles. And if someone disagrees with that, I'd say ask the players when there's no cameras.
I want to ask you, I mean, this is a bit of a silly question because I think you'd probably say yes, David. You'd play in the MLS presumably if you were offered, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think it's the reasons why people are going over there. I mean, the more high-profile players that obviously gaining financially, but I think for a lot of players as well, it's the whole life experience of living in America and playing the sport they love over there. It is a growing sport. I think the figures are now starting to show the influence Beckham has had, and there is a lot more, a bigger audience on the TV channels that showed up there. So it is now starting to come to fruition, all this, the input that Beckham's had. But I think a lot of players, more than ever, are starting to consider going across. The standard is better.
You've had a pretty long career, David, as a goalkeeper. Over that time, going back, revisiting your question, have you ever had problems with any captains in your team about their personal life, their attitudes, and things that surround them?
Not captains in particular, but I mean, when I was asked this question the other day, and it sort of got into what happened with John Terry and how he kept his captaincy at Chelsea, but then he had the England captaincy taken away from him. So it was down to sort of the morality of the two authorities, really, because I can understand why people are saying, okay.
I want to just expand a little bit on the question, because we were talking in the studio before we went on air about things that go on off the pitch, and I know we can't and won't discuss the John Terry situation, but it did prompt me to revisit in my mind things that happen off the pitch, how influential should they be? I mean, are we not just a sport, and should we not be that bothered, Charlie, with what happens off the pitch?
Can I give you one example just at the moment? When I was playing over in Denmark, I played with a Polish player who was sacked from the team for what turned out to be he was convicted and prosecuted of assaulting his wife, and then he went to another club and he was sacked for a homophobic comment that he made in his autobiography. Now, over in Denmark, the sponsors of the clubs have a very tight hold over the clubs because they play such an important role. It's such a big role. So it was literally, a lot of the time, it was down to the sponsors. Whereas in England, there's a lot of other factors, and people will sort of, if the player's good enough, they'll keep hold of them. Where in Denmark, their morality was, well, he's done this wrong, he needs to be punished, and that was it. That was finished.
And does that emanate from the media or just the society that the Danish people live in?
Well, I think it's down to a society thing. Like I said, you look at what happens to players over here. If a player does wrong, a lot of the time it's down to his worth to the team. If he's worth something to the team, if he's worth millions of pounds to the club, then they'll be a bit more lenient with him. If they want him out of the club or he's not a first-team player, then they'll get rid of him, and that's just the way it is.
Okay,
Joey Barton must be a...
Yes,
must
absolutely.
Be a
I mean, Charlie, you've written a lot about Joey
Barton.
Well,
the England team is the example because of John Terry. Once that case was postponed until after Euro 2012, they felt they couldn't go into the championships with somebody with such a charge hanging over him. So obviously that's a situation where it does affect.
So you think that was not a footballing decision?
Well, 100% it wasn't a footballing decision, and it led to
even though
Fabio
the FA
Capello
came out a few times and said that it was a footballing decision.
Well, I think they might have said that because legally with this case that will decide tomorrow, if they said it was non-footballing, it sets up a can of worms, and if on that and what the sort of Ferdinand family then think about that, especially with Rio have been left out the squad.
But surely you're innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah. That's the thing that always bothers me, that there is some sort of evidence out there which is sometimes on video, sometimes hearsay, and it seems that you're judged, and Rohan, you must see this a lot, you're judged prior to being tried.
Yeah, but just on the Terry things, going through that because they were going to Ukraine and Poland, which are racism problems which in fact didn't materialise, they felt that they couldn't go into that tournament where racism could be a big issue, being led by a captain who was on a charge, irrespective of the fact that you're innocent until proved guilty.
Okay, interesting point, Charlie. Rohan, all these things that happen around the game, have you seen much of this personally? From
Racism.
Some of the, racism issues and personal differences that affect the game. You have 11 people in the dressing room and a bunch of substitutes and a squad. How important is unity off the field with your fellow professionals? I mean, is that something that is a must? Does that break up squads? Does it affect what happens on the pitch?
Yeah, I feel that if you're going to want to be successful as a club, and it's really important that there's a unity not just on the field, it needs to be off the field. People need to like each other, but don't need to always extend a hand just for the sake of it. It has to be kind of natural. And I think that comes maybe from the manager.
But where does football banter, and we're all in the world of sport. Football banter is legendary. Where is that line? I mean, colour out the window, obviously. Religion, very difficult. But sometimes there are lines that we all use for a laugh. Where's the line?
Most sportsmen are working class, aren't they? Football or boxing, and I think you've got. I can't think. Sometimes I think we're too sensitive about things. Whereas let's get real. This is the world we live in, and you do have banter, and I'm sure there's an element of some people who actually do. There is the nasty part of it, and they do believe. But when you think about, Alex Ferguson throwing a boot at David Beckham, cuts it. I mean, what your manager doing that? That's an amazing thing, isn't it? And what went on there, and eventually led to him leaving the club.
I've been in a Terry trial a couple of days this week, and most of the abuse they describe as handbags. Obviously colour is a no, but almost everything else it seems to be regarded just that's football handbags. And Terry admitted that he called the QPR goalkeeper fat. or ugly, you know.
It happens. All of it happens.
So,
So,
Muhammad Ali,
Yes.
God, what he called people. He's the most famous sportsman of the 20th century,
Yeah.
the most loved sportsman in the world. Racist. What he did with Joe Frazier, called him an Uncle Tom. He's called whatever. But that's what it was. But you know, some of that was just, some of it was real. You know, what he did with Joe Frazier was really bad. Some of it was real, but at the end of the day, you know, he's loved for what he was, for his stance on racism itself, his stance on what was going on with the Vietnam War, love for that. But people, I keep saying it, people will say things. They will say things they probably don't even mean sometimes.
so it's sense and sensibility, right?
Yeah, no, what you just said there, Frank just said about people saying things and people being sometimes too sensitive. I was playing in a game for Shamrock Rovers in the Europa League against PAOK Salonika in Greece. And I was on the bench coming up to warm up, I was warming up at half time, and these fans jumped up and they was like, nigga. They was shouting out, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on there, but
You just said it.
so yeah, I'm just saying it now. So they were shouting that to me, and I was like, monkey chanting and everything. And I know what kind of I am, I know, like, but me, as I said, I'm not
Does
gonna
that fire you up, or does that make you feel depressed?
Neither. It doesn't fire me up for me.
Over your head?
Over my head, because I can't affect that. Oh, there's a lot of them. I can't affect them. What I did was I kind of turned it around and turned the joke on them. So I went in the change room, got out a banana. I was going on the pitch. I juggled it, I threw it up, done the ball, and then they actually turned to a point where they wanted my shirt. So there was hands through the shirt for it. And I'm not condoning racism. I'm just letting people know these things are going to. You can never stand that.
Amazing that happens in this day.
I think that is unacceptable. I mean, you know, any form of racism is unacceptable, but that's totally unacceptable.
Absolutely.
And I think there should be zero tolerance on that. I think that some of the things are said on the pitch, you know, I don't know. It's. I think, you know, things are said, but you know, people to actually pay to go to a match and to racially abuse a player. I mean, on the other side, look what John Terry used to go for every game.
Well, that's come out in court, isn't it?
I mean, you hear it. I mean, you know, you hear that, don't you?
It's sense and sensibility, isn't it? I have to go back to David very quickly. We're running out of time, so I'm going to ask you a final question. How are we going to do in the soccer in the Olympics? Team GB.
Well, I'd hate to be to put it down on things, but to be honest, I'm not really that interested because I just think
why doesn't it interest you? It's Team Great Britain for the first time in a very long time.
Well, I think it's just because of all the trouble we had before, and because the other federations weren't and the FAs didn't want to be involved in it. And personally, I just think that the English FA should have said, well, if nobody else wants to be involved, we'll use this to our advantage, and we'll use it as a development squad to get players used to big tournaments. But if you're going to, in my eyes, if you're going to include gigs, I think there's still space for Beckham. Because if you're going to include gigs, then you're not really you're not going out there to.
I guess it's a discussion, David. We're going to have a few times between now and the kick-off. So thanks very much for joining us. We've got to take a short commercial break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes to go grab a cup of tea and come back and join us. Thanks. Hope the tea was tasty. You're back at the forum. We have Charlie Sale, Rohan Ricketts, Frank Warren, and Frank's doing a deal on his phone. You see, there's a few more ticket sales about to be done. We've not many tickets left, though, are there?
No, there's not. They've gone really.
But there are
They've
some.
gone better than the football tickets at the Olympics.
Okay, we're going to be joined by somebody called Matt. Matt Turvey, are you with us? Yes, you are. I can see.
I am indeed. Yeah.
Hello, Matt. You're very welcome. What's your question?
We're talking about moral ambiguity, as you've gone on to talk about with David Precious before. In light of the allegations that Klaus Lunderbaum's been making suggestions about during his Southampton career, do you think fans have got a concern or should be concerned about corruption not only in football but I guess in the wider sports arena?
No, I think it's a very good question because I aim this firstly at you, Charlie. I've always believed, having been involved in football for so many years, that it's pretty much a clean sport. Now, you may or may not agree with me, but this has come up. What was your reaction when it came up today?
Well, just first on the Southampton story, a lot of those markets which he alluded to weren't even around when he said they were.
Question mark.
So the big question, he didn't actually name names. He didn't actually say which players, what match, whatever. Le Tissier is the only one who's actually come out. That was in a book, funnily enough, which he wanted to sell, and which Hampshire police investigated and found that it didn't really stack up. So until I think the player can actually put a bit more meat on the bone, I don't think any FIFA investigation can get anywhere. But a lot of other stuff, obviously there's a lot of corruption in sport, but football is a very difficult game to fix because there's 11
Why do you think he came out
11.
and said that? Did he have a reason he's not selling a book? Is he like
I don't know. It's in Norway. He's had his well-chronicled drink and drugs problems, and maybe he wanted to make some money.
So you would
there.
agree with me that there's not a major issue of gaming in sport? I know there's
Certainly not
kind of
in the UK. I think. I mean, Rowan would be very interesting to talk to about that because he's played around the world. But I mean, certainly in English football, I think it's as clean as it can get.
Teed you up really, Rowan. So you have played football around the world. So what's your take on the cleanliness of the sport in terms of gaming and issues and corruption, and in particular, obviously, here in England?
I think it's very, very clean sport, especially in the UK, because it's very transparent. So everyone can see what's going on. The media's always in your face. When you come away from England, I've played in Hungary, I've played in Germany, I've played in MLS and Moldova, and the media don't play such a big part. And then the media sometimes are controlled by the owners. So when you have that happening, you have people kind of pulling strings for each other. And I've actually myself, I've sat in rooms where people were speaking in like different foreign languages, and I started picking up things, and I'd ask the teammate what's going on, and they'll say we're getting this deal put to us, and different things have gone on. So I've seen a lot of stuff.
Okay, not pointing any fingers, but tell us what happened in Moldova.
In Moldova, in terms of what happened to me?
Yes, I've just hear I hear various stories.
Yeah, well, I went to sign there. It wasn't a place where I went to go. With my CV, I thought I could easily come back into England, go to a Premier League or Championship team. That was the lowest I'd been, but agents and the market and going to the MLS had a bad effect on, you could say, my credibility. And I went to play in Moldova, and the way that they promised a lot, so I signed this contract, nice contract. 2-3 months in a row. It was 3 months in a row I never got my salary. And that was a problem, and you speak to them and they're very cold, and the way they deal with you. And they didn't have like a PFA.
I was going to say you don't have any protection from the
No,
union.
you don't really have a union. The players there are not treated well at all. So I had to deal with that, and I had to stay strong, and I think I made a mistake of actually holding my own with the owner, and he didn't like that. And he became, when I say holding my own, I just said, no, look, I deserve my money, contract saying he didn't like that. I was actually contesting when he wanted to give me my money 3 months late. So in the end, I ended up leaving, but there was so many things that went on while I was there that were made for a great book in the future, and it wasn't nice to see. But these are the corruption, as you say, happens throughout the world, not so much in the countries that are really built up and have the infrastructure and the visibility of the actual different entities.
Frank, you've been in all sorts of sports, in particular boxing, but you've advised a lot of people. Do you advise people not to get involved? Obviously you do, not to get involved, but do you advise people about the dangers of off-field gaming and stuff like that happens around sports industry?
In boxing, believe it or not, it's got this Hollywood image, you take a dive in the 5th round and all this sort of stuff, and the fix is in. But in the age of tabloid journalism, since I've been in boxing, not one single boxer has ever been arrested, been brought before the British Boxing Board of Control for ever trying to fix a fight. It's never happened.
So you you would say that there is...
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen mismatches I've seen, but that I haven't seen. However, I went to Lord's for the England-Pakistan game. I was a guest of Sky in the Sky box, and on my way in there, I remember there's this old sort of duffer there, with the old tie on, and he said to me, "You're that boxing champion, aren't you?" So I said, "Yes." He said, "I don't go anymore. Since Henry Cooper days, it's all bent now." And I wish
the reputation that is out there.
Well, that was the thing, but I was at the match where the Pakistani cricketers, and it was a bent match. And
what about Italy?
Just go back. I'd like to ask Frank. What about the Cole Frock who who admitted that he was going to win in the certain round.
That's right. But then, and I agree with what you're saying. He said that he told his mates, "I'm going to win in the 5th round," and he's made that comment. And I think on radio recently he said,
he admitted it.
But what did the British Boxing Board of Control do about it?
Nothing.
Zero about it.
Yeah.
And that's a fact. But all I can say is nothing's ever. They've never taken anyone to task on it. Boxers shouldn't be allowed to bet on fights. It is not allowed for boxers to bet on fights. But boxers do have bets between them.
Go outside the UK. Is it as clean as that? As clean as what you describe it as outside the UK?
I can't. I've got to be honest. In this day and age, I can't think of. It's really tough for me to think of a fight that I've looked at and thought that's a bent fight. Now I haven't seen a lot of fights that take place in South America and the Far East, so I couldn't really tell.
The last Pacquiao decision, did you question?
No. I've got to tell you, I thought the other guy won it.
No.
I thought there was nothing in it.
You thought Bradley won that fight?
I thought it was
genuinely.
For me, it could have gone 1 or 2 rounds either way. So that's not controversial. It only takes your referee or the judges to disagree on 1 or 2 rounds, and that's what it is. That you go back and watch that fight. You got to remember what the commentary for that is. There's so much hysteria. The home fighter for HBO was Pacquiao, and what they do, they cheerlead.
Right.
You get the commentator doing that, so everybody, at home or whatever.
I understand that. We have to keep this moving because we've got a lot of questions banking up.
I think cricket's a big
very
problem.
Quickly, I just want to touch on Italy first, because there's been a lot of corruption issues around Italy. Does that spill into, in particular, Italian football? Does that spill into European football, do you think?
Well, it is obviously. Italy is in European football, but it spills
other
into the Premier League. I don't think so. Not the Premier League. I think football. I think cricket's a big problem because where it's so popular in Asia, and there's such a big illegal betting market in Asia. The figures are just unbelievable.
And we've still
there's less scrutiny. As Rohan made the point, English football's the most scrutinised sport in the world. I mean, obviously every big boxing match is.
Well, I was going to say, if we're just going back to Matt for a second. What do you think? And in particular, of course, we've got the Havelange Texera issues, which have surfaced at the same time.
Yeah, I think as Charlie's kind of pointed out with regards to with the actual sort of corruption side of things, I don't think it's actually a huge problem in this country. I mean, I've certainly not seen anything. Obviously, with football being so popular and I guess so financially rewarding in a lot of sense, there's obviously going to be greed there, like there is in any walk of life. And money's floating around that side of things. It's always a potential. But no, I don't really think it. As Charlie intimated, it's a bit strange as to why Klaus actually suggested it, because as people have said, the markets that he's talked about weren't actually available back at the early parts of when he was at Southampton, and it's quite confusing as to why he's actually done it, whether or not it's a publicity stunt or what else.
Thank you for all that, Matt. I just want to turn to you, Charlie, for a second. You mentioned cricket just now. Are we anywhere close to cleaning this up, or do you think that's still the issue still there?
Well, I think the English game is all right. It's obviously elsewhere in the world fueled by the unbelievable sums around in Asia. The betting market over there. So.
And is that?
Well, there's big scrutiny. As well. There's anti-corruption units. I think they do the best they can, but it's. Is
that going to spill into other sports? Do you find that in boxing?
Didn't the cricketer just go to prison?
Yeah.
So an English cricketer just went to prison over fixing matches. But horse racing, you've had it in snooker. A couple of guys being in trouble in snooker with betting. And football, actually, I think they take more money now in betting and gambling on football now than they do on horse racing. So it's the biggest gambling market.
But English footballers, Premier League footballers, make so much money that they don't need to. 5,000. I mean, £5,000 was quite a big. Is a lot of money to a county cricketer who might be tempted. But what's that?
Well, I think we've discussed that pretty much as we can. Matt, thank you very much indeed. We've got somebody I know who's called us called Ashley Connick, who's a Chelsea supporter, and I know that you would like to talk to us. Hello, Ashley.
Hi there.
We can see you on the screen now. We've
just have a question for all of you. 3 big managerial appointments, young managers this summer. Obviously, Brendan Rodgers, Andre Villas-Boas, and Roberto Di Matteo. Wondering who you think will have the most successful season.
Rohan.
It depends what you kind of look at as success. I think Tottenham will probably be looking to finish in the top 4 again, and then you look at Roberto Di Matteo is going to expect him to finish in the top 4. I don't think any of these
Roma's
clubs
going to expect him to win the World Cup, isn't it?
Brendan Rodgers. I thought if Brendan Rodgers can bring the same philosophy which he will do to Liverpool and it come to fruition next season, he could be the most successful, because I feel Liverpool Football Club, they've fell off the radar for the last few years in terms of being a top 4 club. And I think if he can instill that, I think Liverpool Football Club missed that pass and move football they're used to when they had the McManamans and the John Barneses. So I feel if he can achieve that and finish in the top 4, he'll be, for me, the most successful. Chelsea, they want more than just top 4.
Absolutely.
Tottenham, I think they want a bit more than that. They've got Villas Boas now.
And they've potentially got another manager hanging over his head as well. John, let me turn to you for a second on this. Harry went. If AVB finishes 4th or 5th,
well, I think the guillotine will come down. I mean, he's got the most ruthless chairman in the Premier League employing him. So, I mean, he'll have to top 4. I mean, Harry's unlucky, wasn't he? I mean, you know more than that about Harry. I mean, your views would be much more interesting than any of us three on that particular managerial change. But Di Matteo's obviously got Pep Guardiola hanging over him. He got to win the Premier League and the Champions League to keep his job. Brendan Rodgers' is a problem is that Liverpool want a revolution, but they spent so much money. I mean, how much more money are they prepared to invest in him to get up the league?
Frank, I know you're a big football fan. You look at a club like Liverpool. I mean, they were it, and even when they weren't it, they were pretty much it anyway. What happens now?
I think they got a tough call there. I'm very surprised when they're talking about putting Andy Carroll out on loan.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that wasn't it?
I mean, that tells you,
especially after the European Championship.
Because I thought he sort of found a bit of form towards the end of the season, didn't he? And I didn't think he was getting a lot of service at Liverpool, in my opinion. I mean, I didn't see him week in and week out, but watching any of the matches on TV, I thought he could. He just wasn't getting the service. I think Chelsea bought some good players, haven't they? They've gone out and bought some good players. They started rebuilding.
Well, actually, as a Chelsea fan, what do you think of what he's done so far?
I have to say, I'm so excited about about next season. As soon as last season finished, I couldn't wait for all to come around. The signings that he's made have been absolutely fantastic. Personally, I think we just need a bit more muscle. I think all the players that he signed have been sort of the same type of player, very skillful, low centre of gravity. I just wonder whether we might see us being out-muscled like Arsenal used to be.
What does he have to do to get into the second year of his contract, do you reckon?
Well, it's difficult. If you believe some people, then there is absolutely nothing you can do to get into the second year of his contract. I think top 2 should do it. Should convince Roman that actually he's good enough.
Surely Chelsea are signing players in a sort of Barcelona style, just waiting for Pep's arrival, aren't they?
You're off, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, I don't know how much the manager had to do with the signings anyway. He was on holiday, was he, when most of them were made?
Who will you be writing about as being in a job this time next year, do you think?
Those 3. I mean, all 3 could go, couldn't they? I think they must give Brendan Rodgers more than
I would have thought so.
A season. Same with AVB. I'd say 2 and
well,
Roberto got to deliver
AVB's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because I mean, Harry actually didn't do a bad job, and if you'd said 4th position at the start of the season, people would have ticked the boxes.
The England situation, I think, was the killer for him, wasn't it? Because they lost their form when that was all being discussed, and he obviously thought he was going to get the job. So I think that killed him.
But just
could be worse. You could be an Arsenal fan.
I was in at the Euros when you saw David Bernstein, the FA chairman, with Roy Hodgson. They were joined at the hip, and you felt then, why were we all taking him? Why do we ever think that Harry was going to get the job? Because Roy Hodgson is such a obvious David Bernstein appointment, conservative. Totally different from Harry, perhaps less exciting than Harry, but far more of a David Bernstein appointment.
The view at Tottenham appeared to be that Harry wasn't building a team. I mean, I think he'd done a remarkable job. The view that Tottenham espoused was that he hadn't bought a younger team that would grow through. I mean, I don't. If you agree with that,
some good young players. He's got some good young players. I think. I mean, I'm an Arsenal fan. I'm sort of tearing my hair out.
Would you have given, if Arsene wasn't there, would you give AVB the job at Arsenal? Would you have given that?
I don't know. I think Wenger should go. I mean, I really think. I think he's
Why? Because he's just had a.
I think we've had
a long run.
7 years now. We've had, it's been barren. It's all very well saying the books are balancing. I'm a fan. Every year the somebody's appointed team captain, and every year that captain leaves. You go all the way back.
Would you, Charlie? Would you agree with that? Do you think Arsene is coming to the end of his?
Well, the big problem there is that letter from you've got a majority shareholder. Somebody was almost 30% of the club, who's the richest guy in Russia. He's totally at odds with I think it's ridiculous he's not given a seat on the board. And he disagrees with Arsenal's whole philosophy of sort of balancing the books, as Frank said.
It's not, you've got to have some stability. Of course, you've got to have that. But you know what? For me, the ambition of Arsenal to qualify for Europe every year and nothing else, that's not good enough. You've got this superb state-of-the-art stadium, everything's there, and I think now the fans want more than that.
They do have money to spend. They keep saying they do,
and it's the most expensive team. It's the most expensive football to go and watch in the country.
I don't.
Rowan, where's Arsenal going to finish this year?
Arsenal definitely going to finish in the top 4. For sure.
Okay, well that's what Frank. That justifies what Frank's saying. It's the same thing.
But I think sometimes the fans, like, I know you want trophies and stuff, but Arsenal play such good football that they have now become victims of the good football, because now people are saying that's not enough.
But Frank watches Arsenal every weekend, and he's a bit fed up with that. He wants to see hard-hitting football.
Last season, teams were coming at Arsenal and playing them where they used to put the shutter up before the goals. They came and played Arsenal, and on occasions were outplaying Arsenal. When Swansea played Arsenal at Swansea, if you weren't sure which team was which, Swansea were playing better football than Arsenal. And I just think that we hit a bit of form, and all the other teams lost their form towards the end of the season. Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea seemed to lose their form. They all lost their form, and I just felt that we just don't have any depth of squad. You get a couple of players injured, there's nothing there. And Robin van Persie to be leaving is a big blow for Arsenal. It's a big blow. And the signings last season were not good signings.
And we do. Everyone knows that I'm an Arsenal supporter. We do seem to carry a lot of injuries as well consistently.
I think the biggest problem is David Dean's departure from Arsenal. He was so close to Wenger. He was a guy. I don't think. There's a figure there.
Corporate. I mean the business of management a little bit rudderless at Arsenal now.
Absolutely, yeah. As a letter from us, blatantly.
Very quickly, I want to ask all 4 of you. Firstly, Ashley, where's your team? Where do you think Chelsea are going to finish?
I think probably second to Man City. That's my gut feeling.
Okay, Rowan, who's going to win the Premier League next year?
I'm a Man United fan, but Man City, I don't like so.
Okay. Frank, where are we finishing as Arsenal supporters this
season? I'll be pleased with you finishing the top 4, but that shouldn't be our ambitions. I've got to tell you something, I think we're going to struggle.
Okay, and the difficult one, Tottenham, Charlie?
Where will Tottenham finish? Not in the top 4. Struggle to get the top 6. I mean, I think Man City they've got a world-class player in almost every position, an international class player backing up. I mean, how can they compete?
Yes,
how can anyone compete?
An interesting scenario. Ashley, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to go for a quick commercial break. We'll be back with a lot more in 3 minutes' time. And you're welcome back at the forum. We're in the company of Charlie Sale, Frank Warren, Rohan Ricketts. Just want to talk about just generally the Olympics, and 2 weeks away. Do we feel that the organising committee, we talked a lot about transport, I think, do we feel that the organising committee have got on top of this? Are we going to be a well-run Games?
I think the organising committee have done a brilliant job themselves. I mean, the actual go to the park, and that's brilliant. It's the things that I think that are out of their control, the variable factors, as we said an hour ago about the transport. When you go inside the venues, you see the swimming pool and the velodrome and the park itself. You're fine. It'll be if we win medals, I mean, it'll take on a life of its own. It's just hopeful that the sort of London being gridlock won't put people off too much.
And we were talking before about about boxing and the various elements around it. Boxing and the Olympics?
I think Britain have got their best ever team. They've got a superb team. Some really good youngsters there. Obviously, the big hope of the Olympics is the heavyweight, Anthony Joshua, who I think is probably one of the best young fighters I've seen in many years.
Medal.
Are you going to sign him more to the point, Frank?
Well, I you know, let's see what happens in the Olympics. I'd love to sign him. You know, I think he's a tremendous talent. He fought in for the World Championships last year, and you know, he was very unlucky not to win the gold medal. And he, on the way, he beat the former Olympic champion and fought a world champion in his home country. So I think Anthony Joshua, I think is for me is one of the most exciting talents, and I'm really looking forward to watching him in the games.
Very quick question: how many medals are we going to win in boxing?
I think you know, the women are competing this time as well.
Yes, that's right.
Which is the first. I'm not a big fan of women's boxing. I respect all the efforts and endeavours that they put into it, and you know, God bless them, and I hope they do well. But I think we could possibly get, you know, 3 gold medals, and that would be a huge huge coup.
Before I go to Colin, your favourite bit of the Olympics. What are you looking forward to winning?
I always look forward to the 100-metre sprint. That's mine. Even looking back in memories and stuff, the only time I probably would really lock in and watch it when I was a youngster was when 100-metre sprint final came around.
Has Usain Bolt been pulling the wool over eyes a little bit?
Yeah, I think he has.
Quite.
Yeah, he's got like Jamaica on his seats. I was in Jamaica the other day, and the people are really behind him. Johan Blake, who's another big talent. But I'm looking forward to seeing the football. But I would say until they really excite me,
we'll have to see how we go through it.
We've got to see Usain Bolt got to get to that start line. That'd be such a disappointment of the build-up.
I would,
because there are whatever.
You really think? I'd be very surprised.
There's serious injury doubts about him.
Yeah. Okay, well let's see. He's going. I know he's doing cryo chambers next. Let's hope that they work. Colin, you're welcome at the forum. What would you like to ask these guys here? Colin, can you hear us?
Yes, you can.
Hello, Colin.
Hiya. Just wondering, with the recent success of Adam Jamili winning the World Championships recently, do you think that the media deals with young up-and-coming starlets correctly, or do we have a tendency to put too many expectations on them and to ruin them?
Rohan, we just were talking about sprinting, and we talked before about building up and knocking people down. This kid looks amazing. What do you think about how we treat our youngsters coming through the ranks?
I think it's fine. I think that when they are, if you say, built up, it doesn't mean they are actually there at that present moment. So in his mind, if he can deal with the pressure like we see Messi, this amazing talent was built from a young age, from 17 years old, 18 years old, and in the world we really blew him up. But he was probably raised correctly at La Masia, the Barcelona Academy, to be able to deal with it. So I don't think there's a problem with it. Maybe there's a problem with us not being able to develop the youngsters to be able to handle that pressure. It's exciting when they build it up.
He was a footballer, wasn't he? He was at Dagenham and Redbridge last year.
Who's that?
This little kid, Jameli.
It was at Dagenham and Redbridge last year?
Yeah, he was kicking a football, and they...
10 appearances for Thurrock in the Isthmian League as well, at right back.
It's a remarkable story, actually, because the coaches said he was very quick in training, and they suggested that he was probably quicker without the ball than he was with the ball.
So like Kyle Walker.
Yeah. Charlie, have you heard a lot about this kid, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, he's been built up, but we do that with all. That's part of. To speak to Frank, he's a promoter. That's part of the game. I mean, media always build people up. Certain people can cope with it, certain people can't. But I think that's always going to be the case.
Do you take? I mean, I know you've been involved in sport at all different levels. Do you look at people and say, "I really want to build this guy up"? Do you think people deserve your support?
Well, I think people like newcomers. I mean, the readers like to hear about new stars. That's the great thing about sport, going to see a new player, whatever sport it is.
Are we guilty in our industry, Frank? We promote and then we drop sometimes when they don't deliver.
We're in the business of creating monsters, aren't we? That's what we do. You know, we have to find, it's the fine line where you're not putting so much pressure on a young guy, but you're trying to bring his talents to the make your talents aware to the public, and it's how you do that. Some kids can handle it, some can't. You know,
well, someone like you, there's a responsibility then, isn't there? Because you need to be able to evolve a program for the guy where he has the right fights at the right stage of his career.
But then you get a boxing situation where suddenly then you get some sections of the press saying, well, it's about time he fought somebody. I did it with Amir Khan. Amir Khan, silver medalist, he's only 17 years of age. He turned pro with me, and within about 5 or 6 fights, there was actually some people saying, why isn't he fighting for a world title yet we're giving him bodies? You know, you have to learn their business, they have to learn their craft. You know, Wayne Rooney, I can remember seeing Wayne Rooney play for Everton at Arsenal. You know, he wasn't just thrown on the pitch, he came on, played a couple of, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes of the game. You blood them, you bring them through. You wouldn't put a 17-year-old kid in straight away into a 90-minute game, and they did it with Carl Jenkins and Arsenal, didn't they, against Man United? And I think that must have really knocked that kid's confidence in that game.
Colin, what do you think? Do you think we are, in the professional side of sport, we're guilty of building people up, dropping them, and the media then knock them down?
I think Wayne Rooney, you mentioned him, is a classic example of somebody, he was well-blooded through grassroots footballing. His talent was nurtured, and at the Euros he was unstoppable when he was 16. But by the time he was 18 or 19, he was the face of Coca-Cola. Some other brands, some other advertising they did with him. I just didn't think it suited him. It wasn't really in his personality, but it was a time when football was going through loads of commercialisation. I think it ruined him. He sort of came back, and he's fading out again a little bit now. I wouldn't say that he was that well looked after. Like someone like David Beckham or Ryan Giggs, maybe they can handle the media. I think Rooney could have learnt a lot from someone like Paul Scholes, staying out of the media spotlight, because I don't really think it suits him. Or his marketing might have been a more traditional footballer, sort of grassroots.
Let me ask Charlie this a second. I mean, you take an interesting juxtaposition in this, because you're a journalist, you break stories. You're also a diarist, and you write a lot about the personalities that work around sport. Do you feel a responsibility, if you see that there's a talent there that's not being managed right, do you feel a responsibility to expose that?
Well, I mean, John, you know better than all of us. Some footballers have good agents, some have ones that aren't good. I mean, in this day and age, there's so much money in sport. The role of the agent is very important. I mean, I totally disagree with some of the things Colin's just said about Wayne Rooney. I mean, Wayne Rooney likes the publicity. I think his wife also likes it as well, and she's in the papers a lot.
Certainly does.
Depends. I mean, Paul Scholes is a private individual. It's very much on
personality.
The personality of that. I mean, Wayne.
Do you protect you look to protect your guys? Yeah. I mean, you really are the only one that's stayed the course in boxing over the years, anyway. In terms of the British promoters, there's very few. I mean, there were the people like Jarvis years ago, whatever. But you've been there because you've nurtured a stable. Is that something
it's hard? I mean, it's no different to football. Some are different personalities. I can remember Nassim Hamid. I mean, he was just an absolute extrovert. He was light, and at one stage of his career, he had such a street cred image that people were queuing up to do things with him. And then, if you remember in his career, he suddenly became quite talking all about his religion. Being a Muslim, even coming into the ring to Imam Chance, and it just turned a lot of sponsors away.
And that's something that we've got to learn from. We're going to have to go to a break very quickly. So, Colin, thank you very much for your question. Please be back. We're only going away for a couple of minutes. See you shortly. Bye. Into the final laps of tonight's programme. You're very welcome back. We're in the company of Charlie Sale, Frank Warren and Rohan Ricketts, and we're now going to be joined by David Stead. David Stead, you're very welcome. What's your question?
Question to you is, what sport do you think's undergone the biggest revolution in the last 10 years?
Well, I actually want to come to Frank on this, because boxing has been a stalwart sport over the years, and yet it's potentially, because it hasn't created very many what we call megastars over the last few years, its platform is potentially being challenged by cage fighting and the like?
Cage fighting, I think, is a different audience altogether.
You really think it is?
Yeah, well, they did Floyd Mayweather had a fight on pay-per-view in the States about 2 years ago, and it's the first time that UFC went up against it. Mayweather did over 1 million buys on pay-per-view, I think about $50 a pop, and the cage fight, and they didn't declare the numbers, but the talks were it was less than 200,000 buys. But if you look at Forbes magazine recently, the 2 highest paid athletes in the world, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, so that tells you that the interest from the public to enable these guys to earn that type of money.
Charlie, are we producing this for the future, or are we beginning to look at boxing having had its best years?
Well, no, I think it goes in cycles. I think British boxing needs a great heavyweight to sort of galvanise us, create the maximum interest. When the Lennox Lewis was at, that was boxing was massive then. I mean, Frank's had a load of champions. I think it goes in time. I mean, Ricky Hatton created huge interest. That dominated the press on his big fights. Amir Khan's still a big name. But
I think that these games that the kids play, which are cage fighting type games. I'm not stuck.
Well,
I think
they affect every sport. I mean, obviously, it affects every sport, PlayStation and whatever. But big live boxing still creates big numbers. I mean, Frank's got a station on the back of people's interest in live boxing. But I think as you talk about the biggest revolution in sport over the last 20 years, I personally would say 2020 cricket, because that's totally changed everyone's views on cricket, and 50 overs is now almost dead.
The audience,
yeah, because it's sort of it sort of fits into the.
Rohan, you've grown up with a number of different sports, but you've also travelled the world, and it was interesting that somebody was saying to me the other week about motorsport in the US, for instance. I mean, IndyCar is obviously huge, NASCAR's still big, but the audiences are just coming off as these scramble bikes that the kids are playing on their gaming machines are beginning to get a real live audience. Do you see the world of sport changing for the younger generation coming through? Because that's where people like Frank and I guess myself have to aim ourselves.
Yeah, I think it will change. Like you said, they're not applying themselves in much outdoor activity as much, and I think the kids tomorrow's generation, some of them don't actually, I don't feel, instilled any real passions from the parents, because there's much younger parents nowadays, and I feel in the future you are going to see definitely going to see less. I think less talented, naturally skilled individuals, because they're not honing their crafts outside before they actually either get into the ring, jump on a bike, go on the football pitch.
David, what do you think? Do you think sports like darts and snooker have potentially reinvented themselves, or what other sports do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that snooker, especially with a few players that I think are now especially appealing to the younger generations, and I think that is it's becoming a cooler sport. It's not got the reputation it used to. Same with darts. Darts is getting wider audiences. I think my answer on this one would be, especially in England, cycling. I think for an English audience and for the upcoming Olympic Games, cycling's in a great position. It's gone from being a bit of a nothing sport to something that's now being followed.
Let me take that and put that to Charlie Self for a minute.
I think that's a great point. I think cycling's.
Is that because we're having success in it, or because it's healthy, or because it's green?
Well, healthy. That's the big. Unfortunately, still the big debate whether it's healthy or not. But because of the great success we've had both around the track and outdoors with Bradley Wiggins in the Tour de France and Chris Froome in second place, it's been astonishing. And Sky have invested a lot of money on it. I mean, it is healthy as far as sort of recreational cycling, and everyone, that's increased massively.
What sports grab you, Frank?
I think with the cycling, they've built. You see now that there's a lot of velodromes being built, so it's having the facilities to be able to do these sports. I think more facilities now. I think the biggest transformation in any sport in 20 years has to be football. The Premiership turned everything around.
It's become
it changed even the makeup of newspapers. Giving up football pull-outs and so forth. You never got, certainly when I was a kid, you never got those. Excuse me, but I think the situation with snooker is another good example. Excuse me.
While Frank's just sipping his water, what sports turn you on? What sports really tick your boxes at the moment, apart from football?
Apart from football, I would say boxing. I'm a really big fan of boxing, but as I said, maybe I'm not a fan.
Would you like to see boxing do anything else? I mean, present itself very differently. Would you like to see boxing present itself slightly differently?
In what way?
It's pretty much been the same all the way through. It's there's no,
like in terms of the
people shout at each other, then they hit each other, then they go home. I mean, it's not quite like that, but you know what I mean. Would you like to see any innovations? How the sport is presented?
No, I'd probably like to see much more extrovert personalities. In terms of, I would like to see people realising that this is an entertainment business, and I know you may be like a Paul Scholes of this world, you want a quiet character, but realising that people want to pay money to watch it, and we will pay more money. A lot of people, like the biggest earner in boxing at the moment is Floyd, Floyd Mayweather in sport, and Manny Pacquiao. But I think a lot of people pay to watch Floyd, not just because of his fighting style, because
he's a personality.
Because of the personality. Absolutely. A lot of people don't buy into his style.
But snooker.
David, we're very short on time, so we're going to say good night to you, and thank you very much for being with us. Final question before we go to a break, very quickly. Terrestrial television, does boxing need that?
Yeah, all sports need it.
10-second answer.
But they're cherry pickers.
Is it an absolute necessity, or does boxing live without it?
I think it is, and I think it'd be great to get it on there, but BBC are a disaster as far as investing money in boxing.
Interesting. We'd like to see boxing in more places than we currently do. We'd also like to see you back. Don't go away. We're only going to be gone for 2 minutes. And welcome back to the final part of the forum this evening. We have Ian Bate on the phone lines waiting for us. The floor is yours, Ian.
Hi guys, just thinking about the big fight on Saturday night, obviously massive fight in Britain, 2 big heavyweights. Just wondered who the panel thought would come out on top, who do you think is going to win?
We'll start with the man of the moment, Mr. Warren.
Well, I managed Derek Chisora, so I can't say any different. No, I think that Derek can win this fight. I think it's going to be a tough fight, but I do believe he can win it.
Has it gone the way you expected? I mean, there was always going to be some criticism of this fight.
Well, as we said at the early part of the programme, this is legal, it's lawful. There is no, neither of the boxers have been banned, none of them have been arrested or charged with anything. The police in Germany have had Derek Chisora in on 2 occasions, reviewed all the evidence, and said he wouldn't be charged, contrary to what a lot of people thought. And from my point of view, it's why shouldn't it go on? If this fight was to go on in a year's time, would people be saying, no, it shouldn't be going? Is Derek Chisora not supposed to get a living?
Charlie, you missed the first part, unfortunately, with our wonderful London traffic. We discussed this in a little bit of detail. You've not been overly supportive of this event happening.
Well, not many paper. I mean, with respect to Frank, who I admire immensely, and it's been the best promoter in boxing for decades. But it does leave a nasty
You will use the word unseemly in one of your
Unseemly, yeah, I would say. I mean, they have a right to fight, but it's all about Frank wants to get numbers for Box Nation. And he said himself the other day that what's wrong with the freak show, which it almost is, rather than the boxing match.
Well, it's not a freak show because they're 2 athletes. They're highly trained athletes, and it'll be a fight. And I've got to tell you something. Charlie, you're quite right. What Charlie wrote, and I appreciate everybody having a point of view, and as did Jeff Powell, who's been vehemently against it, but for the wrong reasons. He actually told me he see Derek Chisora throw the first punch against David Haye in Germany, which we all know if you look at the video evidence just did not happen. But the Daily Mail conducted a online poll, and 72% of their readers said not only do they want to watch the fight, they will pay to watch it. So with the greatest respect, maybe the readers and not all the writers, maybe not too in touch with the readers on this particular issue.
It certainly captured the imagination, Rohan, hasn't it? I mean, it's the fight of the moment. Excellent planning, by the way. There's absolutely nothing else happening in the world of sport this weekend, so a bit of Frank Warren
they're all tuning into Box Nation. That's what we need.
what's your thoughts about this fight tonight?
I think it's a great fight. As I said to you, I love my boxing, but I like to be entertained, and I want there to be a lot of. I want it to be really amplified, and I don't think we need more amplification on this fight because of what went on. What went on was not nice. What we heard, the words and the exchanges. These things can happen off camera, and unfortunately for them, people had their smartphones out, published it on YouTube. But I don't think that should stop them from earning a living and going out and doing what they like doing, which is boxing. So this fight coming up, for me, it's as big as someone going to fight for a title. It's actually bigger because there's much more on the line.
You make an interesting point. I'm coming to you in 1 second, Charlie. Ian, very quickly, captured your imagination?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a big boxing fan as well, and these are the sort of fights that boxing fans want to watch. You know, the best boxers in the world, Pacquiao and Mayweather, for some reason they can't seem to get together. So these sort of fights, they do capture the imagination of the fans. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out on Saturday as well. But I've got to disagree with Frank Warren there. I think that David Haye might just beat Chisora.
Thank you very much, Ian.
But
Charlie,
British Boxing Board of Control. Frank's had to put in a writ for restraint of trade because they threatened to. Yes. I mean, how can we say they're the governing body of sport? Surely should, although it's quite difficult to respect the British Boxing Board.
Well, that's the point.
In fact, Frank has bankrolled in the past.
Frank, you made a very good point before when Charlie would make that point again.
The point is they're a limited company. This is a very high and mighty title. But I haven't got a problem with the British Boxing Board of Control. I have a problem with a small clique of stewards.
Frank, we have 30 seconds to finish that. No. I want you to make
sorry,
this is the final point.
They're running the sport, and they're not. And I don't believe that the way they've even handled this whole thing is wrong. Whether you believe they should be punished or not, the way the board have handled it, to say arbitrarily you fight or you're in any capacity you're involved in that show, and you will be deemed to hand your licence in. That's why it's a restraint of trade. That's illegal. You've got to have a hearing. You can't just go and say you're going to.
Final word is yours.
Oh, Frank,
and it's one word.
Give Frank the last word, definitely.
Okay.
Box Nation, that's the last
Box Nation is the last word. Rohan Ricketts, thank you very much for being here. Frank Warren, thank you very much for being here. This is your weekend. Charlie Sale, an enormous effort to get here. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great week. Enjoy the fight. Good night.